So for those of you, can you hear me, Laura? Just make sure I'm coming through. And we'll announce this again right at the beginning, but we'll do it now too. So for those of you watching online today, this does not apply to you all, but to those of you watching online today, if you would please let us know you're watching and register your presence and attendance with us. Simply type your name and the name of every single person watching from your home in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and make sure your presence is registered, and we'll announce that again in a minute. Thanks.
What's Rainmakers? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Would you please leave, Irving? This is incredible. Might want to take a look at those minutes while we're waiting. We'll start in just a second. The objective is to get through the meeting by at the latest 12 o'clock before the rain comes back again. All right. Do we need to wait for her? Okay. Yeah, but you do your opening with prayer, so. All right, shall we get started, you think, Pastor? All right. All right, good morning, folks. Appreciate you being here, and appreciate the folks online. Pastor, you want to open us up with a prayer?
Yeah, sure. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for another day, and thank you for all the rain that you've been sending to water the earth, and thank you for bringing us safely here today. We pray, Father, that as we go through this meeting time, as we talk about where we are and where you're leading us, where we've come from through this pandemic, Father, we pray that you would give us wisdom and give us joy in our conversation. Father, this church is not one person's job; it's all of our jobs, and it's all of our efforts and all of our heart's desires to see this grow and flourish and do well. So, Lord, we pray that as we share our thoughts as a family here, and as we look forward to the future, that you would give us wisdom and joy in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, can we go to the next slide? There we go. Fantastic. All right, good morning again. If you haven't registered online, just if you type your name in the little box there, at least we know who's with us, and appreciate you being here. All right, in terms of an agenda, cover a couple administrative items, update on financials, and then the main portion of the meeting is an update on ministry and mission, both by Pastor Harry and then additional information by Pastor Juan. Let's turn to the administrative items. Next slide. Again, attendance either in person or online, and Juan, you're going to help us register that, right? Thank you. All right. In terms of minutes of the approval from the last meeting, you have a copy there. A copy was sent out. As you might remember, this was budget and elections and the calling of Pastor Harry, a pretty significant meeting. So hopefully we had a chance to look at it. And if I could have a motion for approval of the minutes, I'd appreciate that. Okay, Jan Curry, and second? Second by Jeff. All right, all those in favor? All right. And let's see if we get some online voting as well. Meanwhile, I'll distribute some copies to people who have just come in.
Bob, can I say one thing real quick while you're doing that?
Please.
For those of you attending online today, there's the whole time. If you ever have a question, obviously questions are welcome, whether you're here or online. If you have a question, just type your questions into the chat box. We have people monitoring the chat box, and they will read your questions aloud here in the sanctuary. So please don't be shy to share your questions online, and we'll make sure that we address them. And if we don't address it adequately, please let us know.
Any voting online? Any voting online? All yes? Okay, all yes? Good, okay, the minutes are approved. All right, I don't think we have any reception of new voting members, is that right? That's right, okay. All right, let's move on to financials. Our situation remains solid, despite all the challenges we've had with, kitchen destruction and other assorted bits and pieces, but and again, I want to make a plug here for Earl. You've been absolutely magnificent in getting us this material. Anyway, in terms of bank balances, as you see, end of the year, $163,000, and at the end of April, $162,000, basically. So basically, your contributions are continuing. You folks have been absolutely stellar in that regard. The Lord continues to bless us, and just can hope that it continues. In terms of the next slide, income and expenses. Through April, which is 33% of the year, we've got income about 37% of the budget and expenses about 34%. Again, some of that there's some seasonal or things that occur once a year, so we'll keep an eye on it. But at the moment, I'm not at all worried about this. I'm actually pretty grateful. That's all I wanted to say right now on finances. I'd like to make one comment before we move to mission and ministry. This is almost the fourth meeting in a series that's led up to this point. You go back to 2019, and we were dealing with the formation of the Transition Task Force before all this crazy pandemic stuff happened. In the first half of the year, we had of 2020, we had the Transition Task Force, and that led to the voters' meeting in June of last year, which we basically reviewed and approved some key recommendations from that from the Transition Task Force work. Then fast forward to December of last year, in which we began to implement some of the pieces of that Transition Task Force, including the calling of Pastor Harry and the restructuring of our ministry team. Followed up in the early part of the year with the decision on obtaining a DC intern. And what we've got today is some information from Pastor Harry on what the mission and ministry of the church needs to evolve to. So really, if you think of today's meeting as a piece that started in 1919, started in the fall of 1919, continued through 20 with a couple of key voters meetings, and then leading to today, the middle of 2021. It's all a continuous process that was in large measure also initiated and led by Pastor Gonzalez. So we've got a continuity here that's leading up to what we're going to talk about today. I think I need to keep that in perspective. This thing doesn't evolve quickly, but it is evolving in a organized and thoughtful and prayerful manner. All right, Pastor?
Thanks, Bob. So first things first, if just stop me if you have any questions or want clarification on anything along the way. This is not meant to be a monologue. Yes, Laura. So Bob, or I guess maybe Earl or maybe Sarah would know this. So the question that was asked was, has the option for online offering giving been beneficial for the church? And I don't really have, probably you two are the best to answer that.
I think it's a different way that we receive funds. I think people do need to understand if they do it online, there is a fee to the church. So in some cases, people have upped their contribution just a little bit to cover that fee. But I think it is very helpful to have that come in a different manner than showing up at church every Sunday and putting an envelope in the collection plate.
Yeah, I'd add to what Earl has said. I think it has been beneficial. If the only evidence I really have of that is contributions have continued, and we've been doing very well from that regard. There is the question of the fee that we pay because of online contributions, but it's been easier for folks to continue their giving. I will admit, though, I miss people seeing people in church. But my bottom line is, yes, I think it's been instrumental in helping us.
A fee is 3.2%. Any other questions, Laura, from online before we continue?
I think we have double audio going out, so give me just a second.
Make sure that it could be on your computer. Make sure that your tabs, you don't have two different tabs open, because sometimes it sounds like double audio, but it's just the tabs in the computer. You got it? Okay. So like I said, stop me at any point along the way with questions or thoughts. Before we start, a couple of just basic updates on the facility. So our facility, it really took a hit this year. Obviously, we lost a lot of the use of our kitchen. And we're just now, if you go in there today, you'll see countertops have been put in this past week, and it's beginning to look like a kitchen again. Hopefully we'll have use of it relatively soon. I know we're getting closer and closer to that. I know many churches are dealing with this, faith included, even more so than we are. And then we also are making some upgrades to our children's wing, knowing that Megan's coming on, and we're trying to move, as you all voted on, move toward emphasis in children and family ministry. So a couple of the things that we're doing down the hallway and outside, just in case you don't know this, is we are upgrading our nursery right now. The nursery really was in pretty bad shape. And so with efforts of Hannah and Jan Curry and several others, we're making some upgrades to our nursery. And we're also upgrading our playground outside. There were so many burrs in it, kids didn't want to play in it. And what's the purpose of having a playground if you can't play on it? So we are going to be resurfacing our playground here in the next couple of weeks. Those funds that we're using to pay for that are from previous year's dedicated funds, so they will not be coming out of the budget. And thankfully, we have enough in previous years' dedicated funds that we don't even need to really do much fundraising for these projects. So I'm very, very grateful for those who have given faithfully in the past. so that we can make upgrades to our facility without a great financial strain on our budget. We do have some other things that have come in as well, facilities-wise, but those are the three main projects that we have going on. So hopefully, I don't know, Jan, or Rod, if you have any thought as to when the kitchen will be available for use again. Okay. Okay, so Lord willing, right now just everything is taking so long because of the volume of work and the shortage of workers. So hopefully we'll have our kitchen back relatively soon, and hopefully by the end of the summer maybe we can have full use of it again. But just a couple of brief announcements I wanted to share on that. I want to turn to a brief devotion as well before we get into the ministry and mission update. And I want to share a reading with you from Matthew chapter 9. So in this section, Jesus is still in the process of developing his ministry. He's going around calling different disciples. He's sending disciples out to minister and kind of make new disciples. He's beginning a lot of his healing ministry. And at one point, there's the disciples of John. So I don't know if you knew this, but John the Baptist had his own disciples. And later on, there would be disciples of different teachers who weren't Jesus, but they would believe in Jesus, kind of. Sometimes they had some questions. And the disciples of John the Baptist were often very confused. And so in Matthew chapter 9, it says, "Then the disciples of John came to Jesus, saying, 'Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?'" Good question, right? I mean, it's a church question. You know, why do we do it one way and y'all do it another way? This is Jesus' response. It says in 9 verse 15, "And Jesus said to them, 'Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved.'" It's a typical Jesus answer, right? Very confusing, using images instead of just saying, yeah, this is how it is, right? So he kind of uses a couple of images to share an idea. And the idea, there's a couple of ways that you can interpret that. A lot of people have interpreted it several different ways, but there's a couple of ways to interpret it. So if you go to the classic Lutheran question, what does this mean? We're just going to stick with the wineskins image. So he said, you never pour new wine into old wineskins. Wineskins were essentially the flasks of the ancient world. People would carry them around them. They would put them on their horse if they were traveling long journeys and wanted to bring wine with them. They were easy to carry. They were very durable. They were made out of ox or sheepskin and could be huge. They could carry up to 60 gallons of wine at a time, the big ones, or you had the small kind of personal ones that you would carry with you too. But very, very common in the ancient world, very, very common mechanism. But basically, every time you made a batch of wine, you had to put it in a new wineskin, because what happened is the sugars and the alcohol over time would cause the wineskins to get brittle. And so if you poured, and so the fermentation process would cause the wineskins to expand just a little bit at a time. And if you poured new wine into an old wineskin, as it expanded, it would crack and the wine would leak out, and basically it would be useless at that point. So it was a very laborious process, because not only did you have to make the wine, but then you had to keep up with the wineskin production as well. And then is a very long and arduous process to basically retreat the old wineskin and get it usable again. But you couldn't just do that. It's not like a glass bottle today where you can just pour it in the bottle and keep going. That was the way that they did it in the ancient world. And because of that, obviously if you want to be good with your wine, you want to make sure that you're using functional wineskins. And so the question, what does this mean? This is just an image that Jesus is using. There's a famous theologian, and his name is N.T. Wright, and he says it this way. He says, "Try to fit Jesus' new work into the thought forms and behavior patterns of John's movement or the Pharisee movement, and all you'll get is an explosion." And basically what that means is this. When we in church have things that we try to do, and this was the same back in Jesus' day, One of the interpretations of this is when we have the stuff that we try to do, obviously we try to keep the main thing, right? But I'm sure even throughout your life, you've seen the ways in which the church has changed, and rapidly so sometimes. I think it's changed more in the last 2 years than it probably has in the 2 decades before it because of the fact that the pandemic forced change on us. It wasn't something that we necessarily wanted, but we had, in order to survive, we had to adapt, right? And so there's basically the question we ask ourselves is, what is a wineskin and what is the wine? Basically, what is the vessel that we're holding the wine in church, and what's the important stuff that you want to get out of it? It's kind of like music, right? If you're an old school person, you listen to 8 tracks. Maybe you listen to vinyl. Maybe it went on to cassette tapes at one point, then it went to CDs, and then it went to MP3 players like iPods, and now it's all streamed, right? At the end of the day, you're still listening to music. What you want to get to is the music. Just the form that the music comes in is going to be a little different. And there are people out there who say, well, the only way to listen to music is on an 8-track. But then you tell that to a 10-year-old who has no idea what an 8-track is, and I bet they'll disagree with you. So it's the same kind of thing for us, right? We have to ask ourselves in mission and ask ourselves in ministry, what is the wine and what is the wineskin? What is something sometimes that we think of as the wine that's actually a wineskin? And what is that which we're trying to share with others and get to with others? And then, for us as Lutherans, that we're kind of in a unique place because Lutherans are not really Catholic. We're not the super sacramental Catholics, but we're not really evangelical either in the same way. We kind of bridge a gap, and so that's a kind of a unique question for us. Much like John's disciples were just trying to figure out how to engage what they believed and what they wanted to hold on to as true, and they wanted to do it right. So we ask ourselves the same question. And that's kind of what Jesus is getting at. He's getting at a few other things there too, but I wanted to start with that devotion because I think it's very relevant for our day and age. When you're living like we are right now in times of rapid change, it's really confusing. And it's not just confusing, for the people up front. It's confusing for everybody. And every single one of us, as you've seen, and beyond the walls of the church with politics or the pandemic or approach or whatever, all of these things, everybody has different opinions, and it's really, sometimes people hold their opinions so highly, it gets in the way of actually functioning well in the world. And as a church, when we're called to unity and to function well together as a family, how can we make sure that the wineskins are not becoming the wine for us? So that's why I wanted to start with that. So a question I asked myself is, there's been a lot of change in the last couple of years, rapid amounts of change. What are some of the new wineskins that we've experienced? And like I said, some of these were not wanted wineskins. They were just kind of forced on us as a survival tactic. What are some of the new wineskins? And you'll see some pictures here going on. So by the grace of God, and I think this is God in his infinite wisdom and foreknowledge led our leadership team. Pastor Loy initiated this. He said, we need to get a new sound system that's capable of video streaming. When he said that? He said that in December of 2019. Not knowing that a pandemic was coming, and we had the install done 3 weeks before the pandemic hit. For us, that's God looking out for us. We wanted to move in this direction, and God just kind of pushed us off the cliff and said, here you go. But thankfully, because of God's infinite wisdom in ways that we'll never understand, we were ready in ways that a lot of other churches weren't, because he had prepared us for that. And so we were ready. There was bumps in the road. I'm sure you all witnessed that. There was one service where it was so loud and screechy that, it was really hard to hear. So it hasn't been perfect. We're not pretending that it has been, nor are we pretending that it will be, because technology, if you get into it, is a very, very difficult thing to get right. But by the grace of God, we never missed a service. We were able to join Faith. Pastor Juan was able to serve us here for a number of months before Faith started their own services back up, and we were able to hold on to the importance of Word. We did drive-through communion for the sacrament, which is, something that, Lord willing, we'll never have to do again, but it was something that we had to do just as a new wineskin, right? Still offering the gift of God in the sacrament, just delivering it maybe in a way that was new. We brought on an AV director this year, Chrissy Benz, who's been running our AV system. That's a new wineskin for us. That's never a position we filled before here at our church. We moved Bible studies online. We still have online Bible studies every Saturday night if you'd like to join us. It's in place of our normal Sunday morning adult Bible study. We just do it at 7:15 p.m. on Zoom. Anybody's welcome to join, and we've had people join who don't even live in the area because it's easy to access, right? We moved meetings online. We moved lots of other ministries online. We adapted VBS last summer, and not in a way we ever want to do it again, that's for sure. But it was, once again, a survival mechanism. Just something but we adapted with VBS. That's a new wineskin, the wine being delivering the message of hope to kids. The mechanism, the wineskin being doing it through YouTube instead of here in person. Sandwich ministry, and y'all have adapted so well. In fact, we've seen more success in terms of volume doing sandwich ministry this way than we ever saw doing it in the fellowship hall. And then, of course, the question is, what does sandwich ministry look like after this? And I don't know. That's for Eric and for Greg and for some other leaders of it to figure out. But we've adapted sandwich ministry. ESL with Philip. Philip took his entire ESL curriculum online. He's been teaching people from Guatemala, right, and Honduras and other places. Honduras. People jumping on from Honduras to learn English because it's online. We've changed our worship schedule. We changed our worship style to fit ministry in 2020. Once again, a survival mechanism, something we had to do just to make it. And then we'll continue to evaluate that moving forward, what our schedule looks like, what our style looks like, but certainly a new wineskin. We empowered and encouraged families to study the Bible on their own and lead devotions at home via Advent in a Box. I don't know if you remember those. But we sent Advent home to you, and we said we'll do our best to give you Advent services here, but why don't you lead Advent in your own home every single day? And Lord willing, you were able to do that. I know a lot of you really flourished in that and love that, and that's something we hope that we can continue doing into the future. We moved toward bringing on Megan as a DCE to emphasize youth and family ministry. We have not had a DCE here since the 1990s, since Cassie was here in the 90s. So this is something for our current phase of ministry that is certainly a new wineskin, staffing-wise and emphasis and energy-wise. We underwent significant leadership changes with Pastor Loy's retirement and other changes, and kept the focus on gratitude for the past while looking toward the future. That's something that we've tried to share, and we are so incredibly grateful, all of us together, because so many people at our church have stepped up. The seminary, they teach you the 80-20 rule. They say usually 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and 80% of the people do 20% of the work, and that's kind of the rule that they can say you can go by in church. I don't feel that's the case here. I feel like we have a much more even representation here. It's because y'all have stepped up in ways that we never could have envisioned. And like you were saying, Bob, we really, by the grace of God, have made it really well through this pandemic, all things considered. So we're just very grateful to each and every one of you, and grateful that the Lord has led us in that way. And those are just some of them. Some of the new wineskins were the children's program that we had in the parking lot, Easter sunrise morning in the parking lot. A few of these things that have looked a little different than in the past, and who knows what they'll look like into the future. But what has been the most encouraging to me is we engaged 2020 in what I thought was a relatively united fashion. And there's so many churches that I heard about and stories that I've heard of churches that were so divided by simple, stupid things like masks. And I know that's not stupid because it's real life, but, the people leaving church because of someone wearing a mask or not. And, that kind of divisive attitude and divisive behavior, I feel really wasn't something that has plagued our church much. And the unanimous votes at our last voters meeting back in June, was it, Bob? To me, it's a sign that so many of us here are really good at keeping the main thing, and not getting stuck in the wineskins, not getting stuck in having things look or be a certain way. Volunteer support, I think, showed up. Like I said, y'all showed up in a long way. Financial commitment, y'all have been wonderful in your financial commitment. The Nepali church has continued their contributions to our church in support of our ministry. Including the playground. The Nepali church is helping offset some of the playground repair and upgrade costs as well. the willingness to adapt, willingness to try new things. I think we tried more things in 2020 than we've ever tried in 1 year in our lives. Hopefully we'll never try that much again in 1 year again. But, we tried it, and you all were willing to go along with it and give your feedback and make it better and contribute to it. And so we're just very grateful. In fact, a lot of the ideas that we've heard have come from you of ways that we can improve things, ways that we can get better. I mean, I still remember the day where I thought women's ministry had stopped functioning during the pandemic, and all of a sudden, Kathy, or I forget who it was, I think it was you, Kathy, told me one day about all these pillows that y'all were making from home and these sorts of things. And so the initiative was not even coming from the leadership teams, it was coming from you all. And you all have embraced it and changed, and we together have changed as a church, remaining committed to keeping the main thing the main thing. So that's, the question that I have. I'm celebrating what we've been through, celebrating what we've gotten through. First of all, like I said, stop if you have any thoughts or questions or want to add something. But the question I have is, so what's next? And that's a huge question, because I don't think anybody really knows what's next coming out of this pandemic. The way that we've done things has changed so radically. Do we ask ourselves, so do we just forget that 2020 existed and go back to the way everything was happening before 2020? Do we continue on as if a pandemic is raging among us even once the pandemic is gone? How do we blend those things? How do we take the learnings and take the experience that we've gained from these changes and these new wineskins that we've had? And then how do we remain committed to being a faithful word and sacrament ministry in 2021, in changing demographics, in generational changes, as young people are growing up in a very different generation than many of us have grown up in. So what's next for us? I want to read a quote for you. And this is a quote from Carey Nieuwhof. He is an author. He's a church leadership expert. He's somebody who's very, very well respected in church leadership world and has written many books on it. And he wrote this. I want to share this quote with you. We will likely see large churches get larger. Multi-site will continue to explode as churches that are effective expand their mission. At the same time, churches will also establish smaller, more intimate gatherings as millennials and others seek tighter connections and groups. Paradoxically, future large churches will likely become large, not because they necessarily gather thousands in one space, but because they gather thousands through dozens of smaller gatherings under some form of shared leadership. Some of those gatherings might be as simple as at a coffee shop, or even home venues under a simple structure. We will see the emergence of bigger churches and smaller churches at the same time as the gathered church continues to change. The gathered church, which is our understanding of Sunday morning, right? The gathered church changed in 2021. Many of you we didn't see for a year or over a year. Many people we still haven't seen since the pandemic started. I wonder if we'll ever see some people again. That as the gathered church changed, as culture basically when the pandemic, this was happening before the pandemic hit, but the pandemic just really helped people see that church is not a cultural importance anymore in the way that it was when many of us were growing up. So when you ask the question for us, this is focusing on mission and ministry moving forward. So what's next? And there's two ways to approach it. You can say, well, we just got to get back to the way it was when we were growing up. And that's one way to approach it. Or you can say, how has the world changed and how can we adapt to the way the world is today? Because I fear that if we operate in that first question, our church is not going to make it very long. And I'm not the only one who has that fear. Any church leadership guru out there, any expert out there, any missional planter out there would say the same thing. If we try to go back to the way church was 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we're not going to make it very long because that ship has sailed. And we're just in a new world. And so instead of denying the way the world is and trying to get back to the way it was, how can we acknowledge the way the world is, adapt our methods, adapt our wineskins to fit ministry in the current world? And so I have some thoughts on this. I'm putting a lot of thought into it, doing a lot of reading on this. and some of the reading from within the Lutheran Church, some of it from without the Lutheran Church. But I want to share two numbers with you. And this is just proof of the fact that what Dr. Newhoff said is true. There's two numbers up there, 303 and 97. Anyone have any idea what those two numbers represent? I kind of gave you a little teaser at the end. But so in 2018, 303 pastors in the LCMS left. Retirement, whatever. I mean, whether they retired, whether they moved on to different professions, whether they left the LCMS for a different church body, whatever it is. 303 pastors in the LCMS left. 97 entered. If you look at that, that's 206. And multiply that over 10 years, that's a lot of pastors. That's 2,060 pastors, right? That over a decade. Just imagine 2,000 pastors all of a sudden being gone. And it's just an indicator of what we already know to be true, which is the cultural church is changing. It's changing in the LCMS just as much as it's changing in any other denomination out there. And we can deny it and pretend it's not, or we can acknowledge it and say, okay, so what's next for us? Churches are in need of pastors. Membership is declining. What are we going to do about it here? It's really easy just to curl up and cry and say, well, this is sad, and it is sad. It's certainly different. Or we can say, let's go ahead and find the way that God's calling us to adapt in this generation and at this time. I'm kind of baffled by lots of things. I have lots of questions if you haven't figured that out, but about life. But I'm kind of baffled why you all would entrust the pastoral leadership to somebody who's in their early 30s, frankly, because I don't look like a lot of you. And in terms of my generational background, right? But to me, what that says is that you get it. To me, what it says is the world is changing, and we're not just going to find somebody who lived in the 1950s. My parents were born in the 1950s. I was born in the late 80s. So the world that I grew up in is so radically different from the world that most of y'all grew up in. And the fact that you were willing to go there and put your trust in a young whippersnapper who doesn't even know how to tie his pants yet, right? To me says that you get it and you're willing to try and you're ready to adapt. And so these are just some ideas I have. And like I said, these ideas that I have are not gospel truth. They're not things that we have to do, but I do think that through a lot of prayer, this is a direction we can go. And I do think that through a lot of prayer, this is a direction that will speak to people of my generation. I'm a person of my generation. I kind of understand how we think because I've been thinking the same way my whole life. So I get it. And so this is kind of coming not only from firsthand experience, but from research and from prayer. And I hope that you all are able to ask your questions and share your thoughts, and we can figure out together how to make this happen going forward. How do we adapt? How can we adapt the method to fit the mission, not adapt the mission to fit the method? How can we adapt the wineskins to hold the wine, not force new wine into old wineskins? There's an easy way to answer this. What does your week look like from a bird's eye view? So if you were to zoom out on your little I don't know if you use digital calendars, but if you take, like on your iPhone, you can do day view, you can do week view, you can do month view, you can do year view, and it zooms out and zooms out and zooms out. If you were to zoom out to like a bird's eye view of your weekly calendar, what does it look like typically? Well, it depends on what season of your life you're in. Obviously, if you're retired, then there's probably a lot more freedom in your schedule. If you're somebody who's an empty nester, you're still career focused, but maybe your time isn't taken up as much with relationships and with family. If you're someone who has kids in the house, then all you do is make sure that your kids are taken care of, and you figure out how to make work happen in the cracks, and you figure out how to fit everything else in the cracks, and usually you're just exhausted all the time. And then if you're a younger person, if you're maybe like a college-age student or a young adult single, a lot of your free time, you do have a lot of free time, but you're also kind of in that pressure to make it in your profession. And so there's kind of, it looks so different for everybody, but a good way to ask this is, who do we want to be here in our church? What would their week look like? And how could our church step into their week to have our church be part of their life? So if you think about it that way, so say we want young adults. So what do young adults have a lot of? They have a lot of energy. What do they have a lot of? A lot of passion. What do they have a lot of? Sometimes a lot of time, especially if they're single, right? What do they not have a lot of? Usually not a lot of money. What do they not have a lot of? Usually not a lot of focus. I think focus comes with time, right? So the question is, as our Redeemer Lutheran Church, from a bird's eye view, looking at someone's schedule, knowing that they're on the up and up in their career, so they're probably being overworked, maybe, and it depends, I guess right now everything's different, but, they're trying to make it professionally, assuming that they have good intentions and things. They're probably looking for relationships. They're probably looking for spiritual connection that's not requiring a lot of reading, but something where they can show up to something, and maybe video-based education, because frankly, young folks just don't read in the same way that a lot of older folks do. So basically the question is, how can we offer a gathering space for them where they would want to come and be part of our group? And I think for younger folks especially, relationships are so important. There's a couple of different ways you can grow a church. One of them is get a really flashy band and really flashy worship. It's called the tractional model. But the relational model of growing a church, and I think it's the model that speaks so much to the world today, is to create cell groups, small groups of people that meet on a regular basis where you can show up, you can be authenticity is huge with the younger generation, where you can share authentically about your week. You don't have to say, I'm fine. You can say, it was a lousy week, and not be judged for it. You can say, I'm struggling with this problem, and not be judged for it. You can say, I have this question about God, maybe even a basic question about God that if you said that on a Sunday morning, people would say, you really have that question about God? But you can actually share that and explore that question about God and find answers to some of those questions without being judged for it. I think that's what a lot of people want. They don't have the cultural pressure to show up on a Sunday, so they're looking for an alternative to a Sunday morning. Not that Sunday morning is not important, because that is the end goal, is to have people worshiping together on a Sunday morning, right? But we can't just operate on Sunday morning. We have to deliver something else beyond Sunday morning to bring in people of a younger generation. What does an unchurched person's life look like? How can we create as a church an easy overlap to welcome those who are not actively part of a church to come in to church? And so this is what I see as the ministry and mission of ORLC moving forward. And I'm going to say right now, this is nothing new, what I'm saying. And also, this is nothing new to ORLC either. It's not just, this is something that has been part of our culture in the past, I've learned, and I think can be part of our culture again into the future. And I'm going to share some research with you here in just a minute. But I think God is taking us and leading us to develop a connection group culture. And what that means is, if you're a part of our Redeemer Lutheran Church, member or not, membership doesn't really matter, in this way of thinking. If you're a part of our Redeemer Lutheran Church, if you consider our Redeemer Lutheran Church your spiritual home, not only do you attend church on a Sunday, but you're an active part of a connection group during a week. And what that means, and it's not a connection group that's closed off, but it's a connection group that's always inviting new people to join, with the hope that you'll get too big, you have to break it into two groups. That's the hope, is you get so big, you just got to find new groups, and that's the way you grow it. It's kind of like cells, when a tree is growing, cells grow and they split and they grow and they split and they grow and they split, and eventually you have a tree. It takes a long time. It's not going to be something that's going to grow our church overnight, but it's the healthiest way to grow a church. We're not going to pay for really fancy musicians or anything like that and get the best worship in town. I mean, we're just not capable of that because for a variety of reasons. You go down to the big mega churches for that, right? For the flashy worship. But what we can do is have a connection group culture. Statistics show that this is the way the church is moving. So I'm going to share a couple of those. If you go to Right Now Media, which our church has an account to, that's basically the Netflix for Bible studies. I don't know if you've ever used it, but you can access it for free through our church if you would like to access it. Just let us know and we'll get you signed up for free. But there is a movement called Future Church, and you can actually watch a documentary put out by Future Church. This is something that's been in the works for a while, but it was in 2015 that they produced this documentary, and it's now just beginning to kind of make headway because I think people are realizing just how real and true and good it is. So in Future Church, they were interviewing all of these major church leaders, pastors, network developers, missionaries, all these sorts of different types of church leaders, but people that are well-known and well-respected and have a good head on their shoulders. And they were saying, what is the church going to look like in 2050? You know, we're in 2015, 2020. What is the church going to look like in 25 years? And think about when 25 years ago was. That was the mid-90s, right? So we're not that far. 30 years. So 30 years ago was 1991. We're not that far away from 2050. What is the church going to look like in 2050? And how can we prepare ourselves now for that reality instead of just play catch-up the whole time? And basically what they have discovered through interviews, through demographic surveys, through just looking at the dynamics of the younger generations, is before people want sleek worships on Sundays, they want to know somebody's name in the church service. Before they show up on a Sunday morning, they want to feel like they have a connection to the church. Before they ever show up on a Sunday morning, they're not just going to walk in and hope to find connection. They're going to look for connection elsewhere before coming to church. So that's why, this one of the evidences, I mean, it's an hour-and-a-half documentary, and that's just a summary of it, but basically, there's a lack of comfort in a church setting because a lot of people didn't grow up in a church setting, but they do feel comfortable in like a small group setting where they can talk about their questions, they can maybe even read the Bible, definitely pray together, and explore what it means to pray. And so they feel a little bit equipped to go into a Sunday morning worship service. Honestly, online worship is great in this regard. It's almost like a transitional event for people who are unchurched. They can attend church online to get a feel for it before they ever step foot in a real church. They can see how it works. They can see what the traditions are. They can learn a little bit. So that's kind of the goal is not to, sometimes when churches get too seeker-friendly, church feels like it's watered down a little bit. And the goal is not to water anything down, but it's to provide authenticity, which is so important. So I think for us, moving forward into the future, what does a connection group culture look like? Well, it means that each of us are intentional and set about in a focused manner to become and develop new small groups. And they can be, kind of related. You could be part of more than one. You don't have to be just part of one. But they could be kind of random groups of people. They could be maybe people who have kids at home. Maybe it's people who are empty nesting. Maybe it's people who love fishing, and you do these small groups on fishing trips. I mean, it can be interest-oriented. It can be demographic-oriented. It doesn't have to look any specific way. But the idea is that we're all part of these small groups that grow by inviting others in. And over time, the others that we invite become part of a Sunday morning. They grow, they expand it, and over time, it takes a long time, but it's a culture of connection outside of the Sunday morning during the week. And I think, like I said, this isn't a big flashy program. We're not going to stick, flashy posters all over this. This is a culture change, and it's something that's going to take a little while. It's something that we've had in the past, and I think we're moving back towards. So that's my vision and mission for where we're going, and especially in order to adapt to the new world. Now, what worship looks like, we'll figure that out as we go. What a lot of the other things, the other wineskins look like, your sandwich ministry, ESL, VBS, we'll figure these out as we go. But it's a subtle shift, but it's a big shift to become a church that has a connection group culture as part of it. This is the picture of our mission statement as well moving forward. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. I've talked enough. And y'all, if there's any thoughts or any questions or any anecdotes you'd like to share, please do so. That would be great. It's a lot to think about, and this is not the only time we're ever going to talk about this, I promise. Yes, Pastor One.
Let's pretend that I'm a regular attendee here, and what will be the first step, Pastor Harry, can I get your picture, but how to get involved? What will be the first step?
So the first step is to commit yourself in some way to making this a part of your life. And it doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be big and fancy. It can be a small group that meets at Starbucks twice a month for an hour. You know, it can be, it doesn't have to be big and fancy, but create a vision of a group that you would like to go to. And not another social club, but a group that's intentional about prayer, and intentional about spiritual growth, and intentional about supporting each other and loving each other well. Picture in your head, this is something that I would be attracted to. And then try to work to help create that. Call up some friends that you know, call up not only people who go to this church, but people outside of this church and say, hey, you know, I love getting tea on rainy days. We're going to do a rainy day tea small group. And whenever it's raining, I'll call you up and we're going to go pray. Something like that. It can be anything that just is attractive to you and you would be drawn to, and maybe some other people that you know of would also be drawn to, and then start it. You don't have to get permission from anybody. You don't have to get rubber stamped by the staff. If you say, I need some Bible study materials, we'll provide you Bible study materials. We'll help you get Bible study materials, but this is not, it's an organic thing, so let it be what it is. But just go ahead and start something yourself. And you can let us know about it if you want to, but you don't even have to. I think if it's a culture change, this is something that we want to do together. So that's one way, Pastor Juan. There's a number of ways to do it, but that would be one thing, is just envision your own group and work on it. So I'm going to give the mic. I'll let Pastor Juan come up here. He has a update for you. But I would ask you to do a couple of things. And this is not just for English side of our church. We're going to challenge our Spanish side of our church to do the same thing. But what I would ask you to do is think about it and pray about it. And please come up with thoughts or questions about it. And you can talk to anybody on the board of directors individually. Or the staff individually. You can talk to us. I'm sure next time we bring it up as a group, you can ask your questions as a group. But this is something that we want to start moving toward, and hopefully in a couple of years' time, this will be something that's just part of our life. So, Pastor Juan?
My name is Juan, and I'm going to be soon an empty nester. Oops, wrong group. Okay. That's an idea, right? Maybe I'll begin a new group. Okay. Morning, everyone. It's good to be back at home. I want to give you an update on the things that are happening here. You haven't seen me much here, right, around. I mean, lately, probably most in the library, because I'm working from the library, but I wanted to give you an update on two areas. So if you turn to this, slide number 2 on the handout that was passing to you, it says an update from Pastor Juan. So the second slide says an update from Pastor Juan as pastor at Faith. You know that we have this relationship with Faith Lutheran Church in Grand Prairie, and I've been able to serve in that area as pastor, serving in both English and Spanish groups. So I wanted to give an update on that side as a church. And the other side, what I want to mention to you today is as in my role as an apostolic missionary. Now I want to share a little bit more about that. So an update from Faith. You see numbers, right? So this is not a math class. I just wanted to put numbers there because a lot of times we see numbers. You have your handout, right? So on slide number 3, it's not going to be on the projectors, okay? So you might need to take a look on the handout. Slide number 3, pastors and faith, 75, 3, and 10. So what does this mean? Oh, that's a very Lutheran question, right? Okay. So 75, it doesn't mean like 75 people, right? So 75 is because the Faith Lutheran Church is celebrating the 75th anniversary this year. So we as our Redeemer, we're going to receive an invitation to join in their celebration. It's going to be in October. I think that's the month they're going to be done. So there is a lot of prep. There is already among the people, and you're going to hear more about this later. But also the 75 means something else here. 75 means that 75% of the church is in renovation. So due to the winter storm that we had a few months ago, we have like pretty much 75% of the church building in repair. So might be done by July 1st, which I don't know. This has been very, these couple of years has been very, well, I don't even have the word to explain it, but there's surprises. There's surprises all the time. So, well, that also has been put our membership at Faith in a more open way to do things. So what I mean by that, we haven't stopped worshiping. We have been gathering in the sanctuary. That's the only place that actually that works nowadays. So we have our worship services. We have Bible studies. So you might picture this sanctuary having worship service, Bible studies, meetings, and all different stuff happening there. But also has been helping us as a church there to be very intentional on what to do. So gatherings like fellowship time, like everything has to be very intentional, and we have to prep ahead of time for that. So, but why I wanted to share this, because a couple of years ago, we started a conversation of we need to renovate some of the facilities, because if we are going to prepare to receive new generations or new people, we need to be ready for that, because we don't have at that time like a cry room or like what we have here. And we thought, well, where is all this money will come from? Well, here we are 2 years later, and we are under this renovation, and we are going to have our cry room, so, and other areas. So it's going to be a very fun thing, I guess, for the new generations. That's what it means in 75. So I don't want it to just picture numbers. I wanted to give you more than that. So that's the reason that we have numbers. Number 3 on the slide, number 3. The number 3 means like this is the 3rd year that we are receiving new members in both services. So this is not just a number, but actually there is faces, there is people, and this is the 3rd year that this is happening. So that's a very exciting thing for a congregation that was that has to improve and change and go through a lot of stuff and tough and difficult situations. So this is the 3rd year. In fact, last week we had our we received new members on 2021, and we are preparing to receive a new group. That's about 30 to 40 families that will join the Hispanic service at Faith. So I want to mention a little bit more about this later. But that's what it means on the number 3. There's the 3rd year that we have been received new members in both services, English and Spanish. Now, the next number is number 10. So I was working with 12, but then we ended up with 10. I was hoping to keep the 12 as the 12 apostles, right? But never happened. So we ended up with 10. What is that 10 means? So through the district, we have been teaching this book, Evangelist Training from the district. And this has been taught in English and Spanish with a very specific purpose at Faith. So the idea was to pull a group from our English-speaking community and a group from the Spanish-speaking community, and we have been going through the book, through the teaching of the book, because at the end of the day, this group is going to be prepared to launch new groups, small groups, and it's a very specific plan on how to do this. So we have been done this, and this is also recognized by the district. So this 10 means that there is 10 people that is preparing to be certified as evangelists to the district. So actually these 10 are going to the Texas District Convention and receive their certification as leaders for the evangelist movement. Okay, evangelist movement. This is something that actually is happening, and I'm gonna change from the perspective of a church to the broad picture, which means apostolic missionary. That's the reason that if you go to the last page of your handout, you see this map. So this map is also showing us where we at. The reason that I mentioned apostolic movement is because two people in the area B, in the Hispanic community, had been recognized as a church planting, as apostolic missionaries. And that's Jaime Gonzalez, who's working out of Rockwell, and myself, working through our Redeemer in faith. And the idea is for Pastor Jaime to focus towards the east, the movement, opening new Hispanic missions and connecting with new groups in that area. So my work right now is going to change a little bit more. So more focus to the west. That means that we need to focus more on opening new missions to the west, which we only have like 2 current Hispanic missions, which means like our Redeemer and faith. So there is a lot of field for us to reaching out and going back to the previous to the page that we started as I started sharing for apostolic missionary, is that the update is that through these people that we are preparing, the 10 people, we are not just keeping the people at faith. We are actually dividing in groups and sending to other churches and keeping some just to work in our local area in Grand Prairie. So we already had started this. We have already have our interactions with Hazel, and we're in conversation with other churches to send them out all these evangelists to actually do these small groups, to reaching out to people and creating new groups that might develop in a new mission and even at a new church. So that's what's happening here. And that's also supported by the Texas District, Area B, the church planting movement. Now, that's a very quick update, but I have a lot to share, a lot to talk to you, but I don't want it to keep you here because I've been speaking for an hour maybe or more. But this is just an update. We have been very blessed through your support and through as a church, as a members. I cannot even express how grateful we are, my family and myself, from all of you and all your support. So it feels so good, even as a pastor, to come to what it feels our church home and hear words like, "We've been praying for you, Pastor, and for your ministry." That's very refreshing, and that's very kind from you. So I appreciate all your help and all your prayers. And as we continue to move forward, we'll keep you updated on what the things are developing and how this is happening. And I think that's about it. Do I keep my promise as 5 minutes or? Okay.
Thanks.
Questions, comments? I can talk to you after our meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Juan. We'll have copies of Pastor Juan's handout at church tomorrow. Sorry we didn't get that integrated into the other slides, but you can get a copy of those tomorrow when you're here. Awful lot to think about, awful lot to pray about. The comforting feeling to me is that we've got another step in a organized process, a deliberate process, and the one who's in charge is still in charge. I think what we need to do is pray about it, think about it, talk about it, pray a little bit more, but there is a bunch of ideas here that can take us forward, building on the good work that's been done in the past. And let me just thank each one of you for being here, both online and in person. Thank you, Laura and Barbara, for the projection, and Joanne for the translation of the slides into the format we need for projection. And I just ask each one of you to keep this effort in your thoughts and in your prayers as we move forward with the Lord's help. You want to close us with prayer, Pastor?
Sure, Bob. And as has already been mentioned, if you have thoughts along the way, please share them. This is a collective effort. It's not a one-team effort. It's all of us. So please share your thoughts and your questions and anything else that may come along. Things for Shirley, and we're all adapting, and we're just trying to figure it out. So we'd love your input. One announcement I want to share, the 20th of June, maybe you saw this in your email this morning, we have changed our worship schedule slightly. We're only going to have one service that day, not two. It'll be at 10 o'clock at our normal English time. It'll be an English service. We'll have Spanish translation available for those who need it. But that's going to be the day that Megan comes. So it's only 2 weeks away, which is unbelievable to me. So Megan's coming on, it's Father's Day, June 20th. So we're going to have a service, and we'll have her consecration is the word that they use during the service. And then after that, we're going to have a potluck meal for those who would like to be a part of it. And so if you would like to bring food for the potluck, we would encourage you to do so. We'll be sharing more announcements about that event coming up here in the near future. So please be checking your email for that as we have a chance to welcome Megan here just in 2 weeks' time.
Do we anticipate her parents will be with us on that Sunday?
Her parents will not be here that day. No, I asked her that they're not going to be here, but she will be.
Good.
So we're going to get her moved in the week before, and she'll start on the 20th. So that's really the only announcement I have for today. Let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you that you've been with us. We thank you that you always are with us. We know, Father, that we're just very imperfect people, and we have ideas, and we have thoughts, and we have concerns, and we have fears, and we have joys. And somehow you hold it all together, and you bring us to where we need to be. So pray that you would be with us as we go our way, be with those who are not able to join us in person but are joining us online today. Bless us all as we seek to serve you in the way that you've called us to do so. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It's 12:04.
There we go. Thank you. Have a good day, guys.